Hi there, and welcome to the Play Therapy Circle. Before we begin, please note this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not provide therapeutic advice, and listening does not create a client therapist relationship. All views expressed are my own, and any case examples shared have been de identified to protect privacy. If you're seeking personal support, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional in your area. Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Play Therapy Circle. I'm Kylie Ellison, a therapist, clinical supervisor, and play therapy trainer, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is a space for thoughtful, soulful conversations about child-centered therapy, play-based work, and what it means to show up with presence and compassion, both for our clients and for ourselves. Whether you're a seasoned play therapist, a student just starting out, or someone deeply passionate about working with children, you belong here. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Play Therapy Circle podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ellison, and I am so glad you are here. Welcome you guys to episode 46. I'm wondering if when we get to 50, we should do some sort of celebration because again, committing to 50 sessions of 50 episodes of this is truly incredible. I'm coming to you live as I record this, so when you listen, it won't be live, obviously, live from my playroom today. If any of you are watching on YouTube, you'll see that I am sitting in a beanbag because it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday and I had only one client today, so I only have 2 supervisions left today, and then I finish up. So it's kind of half day of work, so a little bit different to normal. But that's good because for anyone watching on YouTube, you will see I'm wearing my Queensland State of Origin jersey. So I know that we have a big international pool of listeners, and not everyone is from Australia that's listening right now. So to educate and share the culture of Australia, there is a game called the State of Origin that was traditionally between 2 states in Australia, between Queensland and New South Wales. So that is the competition that happens every year around kind of our winter, which is now, and we are up to game 2. So there's 3 games in the series. And so Queensland lost, my team lost in the first round. So pray for us tonight because we need some help. But I'm just noticing in the background here, I'm sitting on a beanbag and it's making noise. So if that's obviously something you're picking up on, my apologies. I am definitely in more relaxed vibes today. I also have, if anyone can see behind me, I have my shelf of my toys because I was just trying to find kind of a nice background. And then when I turned this on, I realized it's not neat and tidy, but I kind of love that as well because that's the life of a play therapist, right? Is that you're constantly trying to tidy up your room, and not always does it look tidy. So if you're watching the video and you can see that it's all all over the place, yep, that's it. That's my playroom. How are you all doing? It is I'm recording this on the 17th of June. 17th of June. Far out. So yeah, there's that. We're halfway through the year. It is cold here in Brisbane in Queensland, so if you are in the northern hemisphere and loving summer right now, I love that for you because it is cold here, and I know I wished the cold, but now I don't. It can go. Queensland people, we're not used to cold weather, so there's that. I am going to do a relatively short episode today, so I hope for all of you, your week has been good so far, and you are of course, in the depths of your play therapy journeys, in the playroom with so many of your kids like me this week. Just really mindful of just, everything that we kind of hold and help and support in the play therapy space. So I hope that for all of you listening who are beginning play therapist or seasoned play therapist for that matter, that you are taking care of yourself as well. So I am definitely trying to instill that. For anyone who's been listening to my podcast long enough, you know that I don't really have a very good balance. At all when it comes to that balance between work and play. But I'm actually thinking out loud as I'm talking to you. I am going on holidays next week because it is our mid-year school holidays here in Queensland. And for some reason, my children get 3 weeks holiday when most people get two, but the private schools get longer. So make that make sense. For the first week, we are going to Moreton Island. So if you follow us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, I will, share you along on the journey of going to Moreton Island. I did go not long ago, so it is a favourite place of our families. But if you are neurodivergent like me, sitting still for any period of time is painful. So I don't know how I'm going to go, like switching off. I'll probably record a podcast, let's be honest. That's quite possibly going to happen next week. So if I do release an episode next week, I will be on Moreton. If I don't, I'll be on Moreton. So just to brace everyone for whatever's coming next week. So what I want to do for this episode is just continue with our back to basics kind of series, because I realized I started that and then of course I've gone off on a tangent as I do, and then I've realized I actually have a process here that I need to follow. So I want to talk about reflecting feelings, and we have another listener question because we did have one weeks ago that I still haven't answered. So Catherine, one of our listeners from Australia, thank you for being so patient. I promised it was coming and it's finally coming because I remembered. So here we go. I want to certainly do both elements in our episode today, but first starting with our reflecting feelings. If you are a long-time listener, thank you. I'm so grateful. We are still in 71 countries across the world. So thank you to everyone for listening and following along. I hope that you're finding it helpful and useful. That's always my goal. If you have been a long-term listener, you would have started at the beginning of all of our episodes. And you would know that in certainly the beginning episodes that I started, it was very foundational in terms of those skills and concepts of CCPT. So I felt at, episode 46, I don't know why I keep calling it a session. It feels like such a Freudian slip. Podcast episode 46, that I felt like we needed to kind of go back to some of those basics. I'm always keen for feedback, guys, on topic ideas, because if you are wanting something in particular, I'm still obviously picking these topics based on my experiences in the playroom, but I'm definitely keen for any of your suggestions too, so please reach out. Okay, so we did tracking as the first kind of episode of that back to basics. So now I really want to do reflecting feelings, and I feel like, no Freudian slip there either, no pun intended. I feel like reflecting feelings is, as we know from Gary Landreth's teachings, is absolutely fundamental to our practice, and it is one of those skills that we often start with as play therapists in sharing skills with parents and stakeholders. So this episode is really that regrounding, I guess, to that skill for those of you who are more seasoned. For those of you who are beginning in the field, no doubt a refresher on reflecting feelings after your training is helpful and useful too. So what I have found in being a play therapist, a supervisor, and a trainer is that reflecting feelings seems to be one of the hardest ones for beginning play therapists to do. I know we've talked about this before. So there is, I think, a sense of vulnerability that comes with reflecting feelings, of putting something out there to the child in terms of your reflections and hoping that it lands, hoping that you have resonated with what they're sharing with you, and hoping that you're not impacting that relationship. And potentially rupturing that working dynamic between yourself and the child. So when we're talking about reflecting feelings, we really are mirroring through our verbal reflections the emotional content that we're sensing in the child. That takes patience, it takes time, it takes practice. It certainly also requires us to work at the pace of the child, because we do have children that enter the playroom who aren't necessarily ready to express their feelings. They might be really closed off. They might be hypo aroused, so quite dissociative or withdrawn. And so having that opportunity to reflect to the child and make sense of really, I guess, that unspoken material in the playroom and bringing that into that visible sense by us giving those statements back in those reflecting feelings can be something that needs a little bit of practice by us as play therapists. I think, my goal is always when I am supporting students through that process of learning is certainly to give themselves grace around having a go with this, and really encouraging beginning play therapists that you can't get it wrong. I know I've said that a lot, but I think that that's something that often stops people from having a go at that reflecting feeling statement, because they worry that I'm going to get it wrong and it's not going to land well with the child. It is actually something that I think in a lot of ways can help build that therapeutic alliance, because we can certainly show our fallibility if we get it wrong, to say, oh, I got that wrong. Sometimes that happens in here. That can be a statement that we can offer to show that authenticity and congruence. So it's something to consider. If it is something that you've been really struggling with, to have a go at. And certainly reflecting feelings lives everywhere, right? It lives in our interactions with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, wherever, at the grocery store. This can be a skill that we can connect and resonate with others really simply. It's so simple, but it's so complex, right? So it certainly has those nuances. So we tackled obviously tracking as that first kind of going back to basic skill. But now I want to add kind of reflecting feelings there, because when we put tracking and reflecting feelings together, we communicate what they're doing and how they're feeling, so that we are really starting to say, alongside our beliefs in CCPT around I see you, I hear you, I understand, and I care, as Gary Lynch would say. So reflecting feelings is definitely that next tier I see from kind of moving on from tracking. This is the next sort of level of that practice and skill that we learn. It absolutely is one of the most powerful tools, I think. All of the skills in CCPT are powerful, right? But it certainly complements the skills that we use in other spaces. So when we're doing limit setting or we're returning responsibility, feelings live everywhere in those reflections as well. We're usually doing it before or after those statements too. So why does it matter, I guess, from a clinical rationale perspective around doing those reflecting feelings? Children are often struggling with their own language. We've talked about that when we talk about play and the brain. We've certainly talked about that in terms of the nervous system, the episodes that we've done there. But we know that neurobiologically, children struggle to put words to their feelings. And it is something that I find 11 years down the line, I am still sharing with stakeholders. It does surprise me in some ways. No, it doesn't. It doesn't surprise me, because I think that there is still I can talk to Australian culture. There is certainly still traditional thinking, I believe, in our communities often, where that expectation for children to put words to their feelings is still very alive and present. So I get curious about that around kind of the context of why we are asking children to put words to their feelings, and often it's in the education space. And so our jobs, I feel like, is my passion and my reason for my practice is very much around educating people, as many as I can, around what CCPT is and how it can help support children in your context, in your part of the world. And so I think educating educators sometimes becomes part of our work around how the neuroscience of the brain works, and how children really do struggle to be able to put that connection between what innately they are feeling within themselves and labeling it with a word can be very tricky for kids. So we do want to, where we can, help to connect those experiences to the words, because that's our role, right, in terms of putting that language, accessing that left part of the brain when we're doing those reflections to kids, so that what they're playing unconsciously, they can start to connect the dots with. So that's absolutely part of why we do those reflecting feelings in the playroom. And I think it's really around validating children's feelings as well, because very often children outside of play therapy don't necessarily have that experience. It's why so many kids often struggle leaving the playroom, because they know that this is a space where they truly feel seen and heard. So that can be really tough if they're not having access to those experiences outside of the playroom. So we know that feeling seen is one of the most therapeutic experiences a human person can have. And we as adults as well as children know that that sense of like, you get me, is really, really important here. So certainly is part of why we use this particular approach in our modality. It's also around that communication of empathy, right? Our sense of, I can't fix this for you, but I certainly can sit in the feelings with you. It's Rogerian to our core, right? It's where our person-centered roots come from. So they are some of the reasons why we do reflecting feelings from a clinical perspective. So one of the things that I think is really important when we're doing these reflecting feeling statements is being really mindful of not putting any of our own sense of self into those reflections. That wouldn't be us kind of maintaining that fidelity to CCPT specifically, right? So if we're doing a CCPT specific reflecting feeling statement, we're starting with you or you are. And I know that there can be situations where that play therapist I've observed will try to use statements like, that just seems really frustrating to you. That statement, as opposed to, you are so frustrated right now, they're very similar words, but I actually think the first one, that just seems really frustrating to you right now, that takes away, I guess, my argument here, and I'm certainly keen for people's reflections as well. Innately for me as a CCPT practitioner, I get curious about why that feels like a more appropriate statement in a CCPT lens for a play therapist than you or you are. And oftentimes it's because we possibly doubt ourselves. We lack a little bit of confidence in our delivery or our assessment of this particular reflection. And so it almost takes out a little bit of responsibility from us as the play therapist if we say, that just seems really, so like it's almost like we are both kind of externally kind of looking at this feeling together. And it's not necessarily my fault that I've kind of given this reflection, right? So I just want to caution that, because I think that, getting to the core of that empathetic response really has to start with you or you are. You are so frustrated right now. We are truly, and you can notice with my nonverbal inflections with that too, right? I had a very different tone. I'm not doing this on purpose, by the way. It's just how it's coming across. There's a very different tone, because I am truly trying to express that empathy by putting the child in the lead. So just being mindful of that and how you're actually delivering that is super important. It's obviously starting with, you're really excited, you're feeling really sad, you're really frustrated. They're our reflecting feeling statements, right? You can obviously do it in terms of the role plays. If children are doing role plays and they are using that symbolism of externalizing their experience by, using family figurines or whatever that looks like, to say that he's really angry right now. You're just letting me know he's so angry. That kind of thing where we're putting, again, the character in the lead and noticing what that reflection does in terms of connection with the child, to really sort of let them know we're following along here. So I want to, I guess, kind of talk to, I've already started, I guess, hinting at that when we don't necessarily start with you or you are, what are some of those common mistakes that we might make as child-centered play therapists when we're doing those reflecting feeling statements? So one of the biggest ones I see is when we make it a question. So if there is kind of an inflection at the end in your tone of voice, and again, I'm talking to Australian culture and Australian accents, right? So it might be different in your part of the world. But I do sometimes see play therapists who'll go, you're really sad right now? Like that kind of uptick of their voice to, unfortunately, it comes across more as a question than a reflective feeling statement, right? So you're really sad right now, you're feeling really frustrated right now, and kind of that confusion around how I'm trying to express it to the child. If you are saying things like, are you sad? That's obviously definitely not in keeping with CCPT when we would ask a question in terms of their feelings. Going into those reflections too much. So literally over reflecting and turning everything into a feeling statement can sometimes be a little bit too much in the playroom. So being really mindful of picking your moments when you want to do those reflecting feelings that feels important to you as well as to the child. One of the big ones that I know is obviously controversial in this space because If we looked at other modalities, they might say something slightly different. So I'm very specifically talking to our child-centered play therapy lens that reflecting our feelings rather than the child's, or involving our feelings in those reflecting feeling statements. That's obviously very important when we are showing our fidelity to CCPT, that we are not bringing in those feelings that we're expressing in that moment of validation and empathy for the child. So very much making sure that we're keeping the child in the lead, noticing our transference and countertransference. That's absolutely essential because we do so much unpacking of that in clinical supervision, but making sure that if there are feelings that come up for us, that we're taking care of that outside of the playroom. You can definitely reflect feelings in a way that helps to show that sense of I'm following along, I'm understanding what you're telling me. So something along the lines of, you really just want me to know what it feels like to be disappointed. That could potentially be a reflection where we're helping to kind of enlarge that meaning and also do that reflecting feelings in real time. But if you notice from that statement, I'm starting with you or you are. So it's not something where I've gone, I'm wondering if you're trying to get me, or I'm wondering if you want me to know what it feels like to be disappointed. That starts with an I statement, right? But it's putting me in the lead, and it's kind of helping to answer a question I have as opposed to having the child as the focus. So I think it's something that, is different practitioners hold different views in that space of, but if we really are connecting with our roots of CCPT, it's probably not something that we're doing. The mistake number 4, I've got a list here. Isn't that great? There's a list of mistakes. Doesn't that make you feel good? List of areas where we might dip in our practice. Going too big. So having a go at reflecting feelings and going in too fast at really kind of reflecting what may be a very core issue for the child. So not kind of taking their lead and reflecting in their time. And really, I guess, maybe reflecting too big in terms of your affect and mirroring back to the child what they're showing us. So say if they are getting involved in a game, say I'm literally looking at a basketball hoop here, I've got a basketball hoop in my playroom. If they were really kind of getting involved in that game and really going over the top in terms of your reflectings of, oh my gosh, you let that go, you're so frustrated. Like, that's a little much. That's a little much. So we are certainly regulating ourselves, reflecting those feelings appropriately and not going too over the top in terms of our expression. So I think that those are really important to notice, to make sure at the end of the day, if you start with you or you are, you can't go wrong, is probably my message here when we're talking about those reflecting feelings. And is so important that we're taking our time, not rushing that process, and reflecting when it feels right for us. So what can sometimes be the nuances that we sometimes miss when we are doing these reflections? So say we're reflecting a mild feeling as if it's a really big one, can certainly feel disconnected for the child. So having a go at those reflecting feelings, but almost maybe as practitioners ourselves, having a little resistance to that. And so wanting to just kind of reflect enough, but not necessarily meeting the affect of the child. So if we have some trepidation ourselves in doing some of those reflections, we really are unpacking that a little bit outside of the playroom to kind of get a sense of what might be some of the barriers for us in really going all in and reflecting those feelings in real time with the child. Reflecting big feelings as if they're small can sometimes come across a little bit like we're not validating the child, or we're a little bit dismissive of the child. It's really important that we're noticing when we're interacting with kids that feedback that we get. I always say, when we are in that space where we're reflecting those feelings and we're on point, the child really kind of does this I don't know if anyone else has had this moment, but I have it all the time, where this moment where they just connect with us as if to say, yep, that's it. But they don't say it, right? We don't get that verbal kind of connection. It's very non-verbal in that response from the child. So noticing when those moments happen and we realize that what we've done has reflected appropriately and it's really connected for the child. If we're not seeing that, if there's that mismatch of those connection moments, what's happening there? Are we going too big or too small? I guess is kind of something to consider. We want to match the intensity and the energy of what we're seeing. So we have to be really mindful around our tone, our volume, and how we're delivering those reflections is super important. So what I want to do, I guess, in kind of flagging this before we move on to our listener question, is really looking at when to reflect, I guess, through that symbolically or very directively. So we definitely know in the beginning, when you have a child in those early sessions, you're often working to help, when we talk about the nervous system, we're helping to bring that child within that window of tolerance. We're helping to regulate them. We're helping to orientate them to the space. We're helping to build that sense of safety and trust. So what we often find is that we are doing a lot of tracking and reflecting feelings to help support that child. So we are certainly working on helping them to have those big feelings validated. And so we're noticing how we're doing that in our tone, in our volume, in our intensity, in our pace, in the language that we're using. So obviously for very dysregulated children, making sure that we are making those statements short, succinct, but calm, regulated, not to the point that we are being dismissive or we are being almost a little bit kind of patronizing. We don't want to do any of that. We want to make sure that the child feels like we truly get it. And I find, and this is only 11 years in that I can say this, I feel like when I'm doing some of those reflections with dysregulated children at the beginning of their play therapy journey, it's actually more about being my authentic self. So I think that once you've got, some years under your belt or just experiences under your belt, depending on how you feel, and you have seen a lot of the presentations before, you really do get this sense of, I just absolutely trust the process. Like, I just know that this is how it goes. I've seen this before. I know how this child, and not always does this actually happen, but I do think you build a sense of confidence in yourself that gives you that permission to be authentic and saying, yeah, it's really tough in here. You're just struggling today. It feels so overwhelming and you're just letting me know. Yeah. It's really in that conversational kind of reflection of those feelings that comes very naturally at this point for me, because it's part and parcel of being yourself in the playroom and doing CCPT. So I think it's certainly like looking for those cues around children if they are struggling from a regulation perspective in the beginning to help reflect those feelings to bring that kind of co-regulation space into the forefront. And then as we move through this therapy journey, it moves towards us certainly being able to connect and reciprocate with the child, where we're doing those reflecting feelings and we're noticing that it's landing and we're noticing that it's connecting with them because we know them well as we kind of progress through 20, 30, 40 sessions, right? And we follow their lead. We can't expect children to have this incredible growth in terms of their emotional vocabulary or just their sense of awareness of self too quickly. It really has to be at their pace for it to be long-term sustainable change, as we say. So I hope that has been a nice refresher, because I just wanted to kind of go over again what we have covered in our earlier, episodes. If you go back to the beginning, feel free to re-listen, and I'm sure every time you would listen, there's probably something else that you grab in terms of helpfulness in that space, so please do. But I hope that overview has been really helpful. I want to just do the last couple of minutes here and then finish off this episode with our listener question. I was going to say viewer question. Maybe we have viewers on the YouTube, who knows? But I want to answer this question. So before I do, I just want to remind you guys, if you have a listener question, I'm keen for it. We haven't had any more than these two so far. So if you guys want to send in a question, we would love to hear from you. So I want to read out Catherine's question. She is in the early childhood sector as a beginning play therapist. So thank you, Catherine, so much for sending this through. So if I was to read it out now, here we go. Let's hear Catherine's question. So she asks, are there and what are the flow-on effects of COVID on the development of children born after COVID, the younger siblings of the COVID generation? Has there been research into this group, or is it too early to say? In the early childhood space, the last of the COVID generation children, so around 2020 and 2021, head to school next year, but I feel we are still seeing the same, if not worse, effects. Even though these 2022 and 2023 babies weren't born into lockdowns, they're born into home environments that still bear the results of that stress, where older siblings where older siblings continue to struggle and parents continue to navigate the challenges. Couldn't have said it better if I tried, Catherine. Well done. These babies enter preschool in 2027. I was looking for evidence supporting the idea that being born after COVID doesn't mean that they aren't affected. Brilliant question. Oh, I love this. And I literally have 5 minutes to answer this before I need to wrap up this episode. So we might start this conversation, right, Catherine? And then we will continue it for sure. But I love this question because I think it's incredibly relevant to us across the globe, working with families, not only with children born during COVID, but around that time. So I definitely want to, commend Catherine on your observations here, because that is definitely something that we need to chat more about. The post-COVID babies are showing effects. So to kind of answer your question quickly, and then I'm going to answer it and unpack it in terms of that, 100%, we are seeing that, and they are. It doesn't mean that just because they were born after COVID that they're not affected, right? Because there's just so many reasons and factors that influence this. So let me break it down for you, Catherine, and to all of our listeners, because you absolutely are on track here with this observation. So we still have family stress. That family stress is still transmitted, whether they were born during that time or they were born after. So babies obviously develop their emotional sense of awareness from their home environment. So if parents are depleted and older siblings are dysregulated, the baby develops that nervous system environment. So it didn't, and this is my biggest issue. I don't want to get on my soapbox. This is my biggest issue with this, right? Is that fundamentally, we have been told, well, COVID finished in 2022, so everyone get back to life. That stress just doesn't, disappear into the ether. We have families that are stressed. We have parents that are, traumatized from that experience. We're seeing in the literature it being called a mass trauma event across the globe. So this isn't something that just impacted the babies and that's it. We have dysregulated, stressed out, exhausted parents, and then we have older siblings who also went through that experience of COVID lockdowns and are navigating a post-COVID world. So 100%, that family stress transmission is real. Co-regulation availability. If you have a parent who's managing a dysregulated older COVID generation child, they have less regulation capacity left for the baby. So it's not through their it's no fault at all. This is absolutely essential in all of these conversations that we say that parents have been put in a really challenging position holistically, right? But it's also about through depletion, just of, everyone in the family home needing that support at one time. Maternal mental health, we talked about this in our episode around COVID, but it's absolutely relevant and important that perinatal anxiety and depression rates obviously rose during the pandemic, but we're also seeing it after the pandemic as well. We often talk about what the literature sort of has begun to discuss is around the fact that it almost kind of like opened a lid, that's a really concrete way of saying it, where it sort of triggered or opened the floodgates, I guess, for people who had been struggling with anxiety and depression, who had maybe flown under the radar in terms of mental health services. COVID just kind of, opened that portal, I guess. And so many more people are noticing and seeking supports for that anxiety and depression post-COVID. So absolutely, obviously with a baby born during that time or born to a parent who's anxious or depleted or stressed out or exhausted themselves, that they're going to be affected by that, regardless of whether the lockdown happened or not. We know that in our communities now, and again, I talk to Australia, but I assume it's global, that we have a reduced village out there as well. So the social isolation of the pandemic definitely kind of changed, I guess, the way that we have access to that extended family support, mothers groups, community groups, all of those things. They didn't necessarily return after COVID as well. There's been that slow transition or not at all. So definitely a reduced village is another component. And then that sibling modeling is another part of it when we're looking at the family system, right? So younger children learn to co-regulate partly by how it's role modeled by adults and older siblings. So if there is dysregulation in the family home, they are no doubt going to be receptive to some of that learnings and maybe take on some of those approaches as well. So we're certainly seeing that too. The research is definitely in its infancy, no pun intended, and also noticing, obviously, that with this age group, they're still little. And I think that we're going to need to see those longitudinal studies as time progresses, but I have no doubt that that data will come. But certainly those mechanisms that I talked about, family stress, maternal mental health, co-regulation, early caregiving environments, they are, parts and factors of anxiety that we have seen for many years before. It's not unique to the COVID lockdown. So obviously, more broadly, we're seeing the pandemic cohort research definitely telling us there's already developmental effects. We're seeing family systems evidence here that certainly supports your suggestion, Catherine, around what you're seeing. And certainly, I think, for the early childhood centre, we're seeing this kind of flow on effect as well. So I certainly, reiterate, I guess, some of your observations, Catherine, in your question. So these children who are coming post-COVID may need the same relational, regulation-focused, trauma-informed approach as their older siblings. I just think that needs to be part and parcel of our approach in play therapy, but in, the early childhood space anyway, because we are working with a post-COVID world. And what does that look like for everyone that was around that time or born after? And the flow-on effects, I think, are going to be generational, 100%. So supporting the whole family system is so important, arguably, and also the early childhood educators are just such an incredible position to be able to offer that consistent, attuned, regulated attachment role model experience, which is absolutely critical to mitigating some of these factors. So I am so grateful for your question, Catherine. I hope that that's kind of answered it a little bit and sort of planted the seed around some of those factors that are have contributed to what you're seeing in your everyday work. So thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate you. That takes us to the end of the episode. This was a short and sweet one, you guys, today. So I am going to head off to my next appointment, but I want to thank you guys for listening. As I said, I will try and do an episode tomorrow on Moreton Island. So, stay tuned for that, whatever that happens. But please follow us on socials, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have our episodes dropping every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get good podcasts. Please feel free to like and share. We also have our free community, our circle community. So we'll put all of the links in the description of this episode below if you're interested in connecting with us and staying connected. But thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here. And I wish you all a wonderful week ahead. Hopefully my team wins tonight. Send us prayers. We'll see how we go. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Look after yourselves and each other. Go well, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Play Therapy Circle. If anything resonated with you today, I'd love it if you could follow the podcast, share it with a colleague, or leave a short review. It really helps others find our circle. And if you have a topic or question you'd love me to explore, I'd love to hear from you. This space is for you, and I want it to feel like a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you belong here.